I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 32 years old, and I'm staring at my security camera app in complete shock. There they are, my mother, sister, and brother-in-law standing outside my front door looking desperate. They haven't contacted me in 8 months since I moved. Not a single call. Not one text. But now they're here, and I feel a toxic mixture of anger, confusion, and vindication swirling inside me. My finger hovers over the intercom button. Should I let them in? If I knew then what I know now, I would never have made the terrible mistake of considering it. Before I dive into this wild story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever had to escape toxic family members, hit that like button and subscribe to let me know I'm not alone. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this nightmare unfolded. It all started 8 months ago when I made the life-changing decision to move away from my toxic family. Looking back, I should have done it years earlier. But it took an unexpected catalyst to finally give me the courage. My grandmother passed away and left me an inheritance of $3.2 million and her prized jewelry collection. Gran was always the only one who truly saw me. While my mother Diana consistently favored my sister Rebecca, Gran was my ally. She knew how I was treated and made sure I would be taken care of after she was gone. "You deserve a fresh start, Cassie," she had told me during our last visit together. "Don't let them hold you back anymore." When the will was read, you could have heard a pin drop. My mother's face turned an alarming shade of red, and Rebecca's jaw practically hit the floor. They had both expected to receive the bulk of the inheritance, especially since they'd been the ones taking care of Gran during her final years, which mostly consisted of occasional obligatory visits while complaining about the smell of her house. At first, they acted supportive. Too supportive. "Cassie, darling, we're so happy for you," my mother said, her arm around my shoulders feeling more like a restraint than comfort. "You know, I've always wanted to renovate the kitchen. Nothing extravagant, just a little update." Rebecca chimed in immediately. "And Kyle's business could really use some capital right now. It's a guaranteed return on investment." Kyle, my brother-in-law, was a serial entrepreneur with a string of failed business ventures. His latest was a cryptocurrency startup that seemed to consist entirely of a website and his unwavering optimism. "It's going to be the next Bitcoin," he assured me over dinner that night. "Early investors will see returns of at least 500%. I can get you in on the ground floor." I pushed my food around my plate, stomach tightening with anxiety. "I haven't decided what I'm doing with the money yet. I need time to think." Diana's smile tightened. "Don't be selfish, Cassandra. Family helps family. Your grandmother would have wanted you to share. She would have left it to all of us if that were true," I said quietly. The table fell silent. Rebecca slammed down her wine glass. "So that's it? You're just going to hoard it all for yourself? After everything we've done for you?" I couldn't recall exactly what they had done for me, besides making me feel like an outsider in my own family for 32 years. That night, after excusing myself to go to the bathroom during dessert, I overheard them talking in the kitchen as I was coming back down the hallway. "She's always been so difficult," my mother was saying. Honestly, I don't know what my mother was thinking, leaving everything to Cassie. What's she going to do with it? She can barely manage her own life. "Don't worry," Kyle replied, his voice low and calculating. "I've been working on her. She'll invest in the business. Once she does, we can dilute her shares. She won't even understand what's happening until it's too late." Rebecca laughed. "God, she's so gullible. Remember when we convinced her she was adopted? She believed it for 3 years. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. This wasn't new behavior, but hearing it so plainly stated knocked the wind out of me. The realization crashed over me like a wave. They didn't love me. They never had. I was just a means to an end, a walking ATM they were trying to crack the pin for. I slipped back upstairs without them noticing and had a full-blown panic attack in the guest bathroom. As I sat on the cold tile floor, trying to steady my breathing, I made a decision. I needed to get away from these people. Far away. The next morning, I left early, making an excuse about a headache. Over the following weeks, I secretly met with financial advisors, secured my assets, and began house hunting not in neighboring towns, but 3 states away. I settled on a beautiful Victorian in Portland, Maine, far from my family in Connecticut. On moving day, I left without saying goodbye. Just a brief note saying I needed space. I expected frantic calls, worried texts, maybe even a visit to check on me. But there was nothing. Absolute silence. It was as if I'd never existed at all. Portland, Maine was everything I hoped it would be: quaint, peaceful, and most importantly, far from my family. My new home was a gorgeous 3-story Victorian with original hardwood floors, stained glass windows, and a wraparound porch where I could sip morning coffee while watching the fog roll in from the harbor. It needed some work, but I had the resources and time to make it perfect. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. No one was watching me, judging me, or waiting for me to fail so they could swoop in and take what was mine. I spent the first few weeks just wandering through the rooms, marveling at the fact that this beautiful space was all mine. This is where healing begins, I told myself, running my hand along the mahogany banister. New house, new me. Despite not needing to work financially, I took a job at a local publishing house as an editorial assistant. I'd always loved books, and the structure and social interaction seemed important for my mental health. My new colleagues were welcoming, especially Jessica, a fellow editor who immediately took me under her wing. "You have to join us for trivia night at Harborview Pub," she insisted after my first week. "Best way to meet people in Portland." That's where I met Michael, a local architect with kind eyes and an easy laugh. He and Jessica had been friends since college, and the three of us quickly formed a tight-knit group. "So what brings you to Portland?" Michael asked one evening over drinks. "Most people are fleeing to warmer climates, not moving to where winter lasts 6 months." I hesitated, unsure how much to share. Family complications. Needed a fresh start. They both nodded understandingly, not pushing for details, which I appreciated. I wasn't ready to unpack all that baggage yet, except with Dr. Samantha Reed, the therapist I started seeing weekly. "Family trauma doesn't disappear when you change your location," Dr. Reed warned during our second session. "The geographical cure has its limits." I nodded, but secretly believed that distance would solve everything. I was wrong. Despite my beautiful new home, budding friendships, and peaceful surroundings, I couldn't shake the hurt of my family's silence. Each day, I checked my phone obsessively, expecting to see their names on my screen. "They must be worried," I told Dr. Reed during our 4th session. "Any normal family would at least check to make sure I'm alive." "From what you've told me about them, Cassandra, do you really believe they're a normal family?" she asked gently. I didn't answer, but we both knew the truth. The silence was deafening, and it triggered memories I'd long suppressed. Like the time I won a statewide writing competition in high school, and my mother couldn't be bothered to attend the ceremony because Rebecca had a hair appointment. Or how my father, before he left us, would always refer to Rebecca as the pretty one and me as the smart one, as if I couldn't possibly be both. My childhood bedroom had been in the basement while Rebecca had the large upstairs room with the bay window. "You like your privacy," Diana would say when I complained. But really, it was easier to pretend I didn't exist when I was out of sight. These memories haunted my dreams. I'd wake up gasping for air, convinced I was back in that basement room, hearing them laughing upstairs without me. The nightmares became so frequent that I developed insomnia, afraid to close my eyes. That's when I installed the security system, top of the line with cameras covering every approach to the house, motion sensors, and alerts, sent directly to my phone. The security company representative raised his eyebrows at my specifications. "This is more security than most banks have, ma'am," he said. "Are you sure you need all this?" I nodded firmly. Absolutely. It wasn't rational. How would they find me? Why would they come looking when they clearly didn't care? But anxiety rarely follows logic, and the cameras gave me a sense of control I desperately needed. As the months passed, I settled into a routine. Work, therapy, occasional outings with Jessica and Michael. I started volunteering at the local animal shelter, finding comfort in the unconditional love of abandoned creatures who understood what it meant to be discarded. I was slowly healing, learning to embrace my new life and freedom. Dr. Reed noted my progress, how I was standing taller, speaking more confidently, making decisions without second-guessing myself. "You're doing remarkably well, Cassandra," she said at our 6-month check-in. "I'm proud of the work you're doing." For the first time, I felt proud too. Maybe I didn't need my family to validate my existence after all. Then the email came. I was at work, editing a manuscript, when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made my heart stop. Kyle Reynolds. Subject: Rebecca is sick. Please call us. My carefully constructed piece shattered in an instant. My hands trembled as I opened the email from Kyle. The message was brief but devastating. "Cassie, I know things ended badly, but you need to know that Rebecca has been diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma. The prognosis isn't good. Your mother is falling apart. Whatever issues you have with the family, please put them aside. Rebecca is asking for you. Call us as soon as you get this." My stomach dropped. Cancer? Rebecca? Despite everything, she was still my sister. Guilt and panic washed over me in equal measure. I immediately reached for my phone, ready to call, when something stopped me. A tiny voice of suspicion that had been growing stronger during my months of therapy. I put the phone down and reread the email. Something about the wording felt off. Whatever issues you have with the family, minimize the years of emotional abuse. And Rebecca is asking for, you didn't sound like my sister, who had barely acknowledged my existence unless she needed something. I called Dr. Reed's office and was lucky enough to get an emergency session that afternoon. "This email has really thrown me," I admitted, showing her my phone. "I feel terrible. What if she's really sick, and I'm not there? What kind of person does that make me?" Dr. Reed read the message carefully. "Cassandra, what evidence do you have that this information is accurate?" I blinked. "It's from Kyle. Why would he lie about something like this? Based on what you've told me about your family dynamics, they have a history of manipulation to get what they want. Before you respond, perhaps you should verify the information." Her suggestion was so simple yet hadn't occurred to me. The conditioning to believe and obey my family was still deeply ingrained. How would I do that without contacting them directly? "There are ways," she said. "Hospital stays are often mentioned in local papers. Social media can reveal a lot. You have investigative skills from your editorial work." That evening, I began my research. I scoured the local Connecticut newspapers for any mention of Rebecca Reynolds being hospitalized. Nothing. I checked the cancer support groups in their area. Rebecca's name didn't appear on any prayer lists or fundraisers. Then I turned to social media. Rebecca's Instagram, which she normally kept private, had recently been made public, likely to reach more people with her supposed illness. But instead of finding posts about hospital visits or cancer treatments, I found photos of her and Kyle at a beach resort in Cancun. The timestamp: 3 days ago. The photos showed her sipping margaritas, perfectly healthy and tanned, with captions about much-needed R&R and hashtags like "blessed and living my best life." My blood boiled. They had lied, not just a small lie, but a monstrous one, using cancer as bait to lure me back. The manipulation was so calculating, so cruel, that it left me breathless. I took screenshots of everything and forwarded them to Dr. Reed with a brief message. "You were right." Her response came quickly. "This confirms your instincts were correct. How do you want to proceed?" I didn't respond to Kyle's email. Instead, I took action to protect myself. I blocked their email addresses, strengthened my social media privacy settings, and changed all my passwords. I even contacted my bank to add extra verification steps to access my accounts. Then I called the security company. "I'd like to upgrade my system," I told the representative. "Additional cameras, particularly at the back entrances and covering the perimeter of the property." "Has there been an incident, Miss Mitchell?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Not yet," I replied, "but I'm being proactive." That night, I invited Jessica and Michael over for dinner. I needed to be around people who genuinely cared about me, to remind myself that not everyone in the world was like my family. "I need to tell you guys something," I said after we'd finished eating. I explained about my family, the inheritance, their manipulation, and my escape to Portland. I left out specific details about the amount of money, but made it clear that they had been after my inheritance. "That's awful, Cassie," Jessica said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "No wonder you kept this to yourself. But you can trust us. We're your friends because we like you, not because of what you have. Michael nodded in agreement. Family should support each other, not tear each other down. You did the right thing getting away from them. Their words were comforting, but as they were leaving, I overheard Jessica whispering to Michael in the foyer. Can you imagine having that kind of money? Must be nice to buy a house like this right away. My heart sank. Was I paranoid, or was there an edge of envy in her voice? Could I truly trust anyone? The thought that my new friends might also see me as a resource rather than a person was devastating. I began to pull back, canceling plans and working from home more often. The walls I had cautiously lowered began to rise again, higher and stronger than before. My Victorian dream home started to feel like a fortress, beautiful but isolating. As I armed my security system that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. If they had lied about cancer to get to me, what else were they capable of? 3 months after the fake cancer email, I noticed something odd in my bank statement. There were small withdrawals, $50 here, $75 there, that I couldn't remember making. Individually, they were insignificant amounts that I might have overlooked, but together they added up to over $600 in the past month alone. I immediately called my financial advisor, Thomas Wilson. I need to meet with you today, I said, trying to keep the panic from my voice. It's urgent. 2 hours later, I was sitting in his office, my bank statement spread across his desk. These transactions are concerning, Thomas said, adjusting his glasses as he scrutinized the papers. They appear to be digital transfers initiated through your online banking portal. But I didn't make them, I insisted. And I'm extremely careful with my passwords. Thomas nodded, his expression grave. I'm going to contact the bank's fraud department immediately. We'll need to close these accounts and open new ones with enhanced security protocols. While he made the call, I sat there feeling violated. Someone had been siphoning money from my accounts, small enough amounts that I might not notice. But over time, it would have become substantial. The bank is launching an investigation, Thomas said after hanging up. They'll trace the IP addresses used to access your account. In the meantime, we're freezing all your accounts and setting up new ones with multi-factor authentication. I left his office with temporary cards and a growing sense of unease. Who would have access to my banking information? The answer seemed obvious, but I needed proof. A week later, Thomas called with news. The bank security team traced the access points, he said. Most of the unauthorized logins came from an IP address in New Haven, Connecticut, my hometown, where my family still lived. There's more, Thomas continued. They attempted to access your investment accounts as well, but were unsuccessful thanks to our additional security measures. That afternoon, I contacted James Mercer, a private investigator recommended by Thomas. We met at a cafe far from my home or workplace. I need information on 3 people, I explained, sliding a piece of paper with their names across the table. They may be trying to access my finances fraudulently. James was a former police detective with gray at his temples and eyes that missed nothing. Family? He asked, glancing at the names. I nodded. Family cases are always the most complicated, he said. What exactly do you want to know? Their financial situation. Whether they've been looking for me. Anything that might indicate their intentions? He quoted his rate, which was steep but worth it for my peace of mind. I'll have preliminary information in a week. That week was excruciating. I jumped at every noise, checked my security cameras obsessively, and slept with a baseball bat beside my bed. When James finally called to arrange another meeting, I nearly collapsed with relief. Your family is in dire financial straits, he said without preamble when we met. Your brother-in-law, Kyle Reynolds, has accumulated over $200,000 in debt from failed business ventures and personal loans. Their house has a second mortgage, and they've missed the last 3 payments. Foreclosure proceedings will begin soon if they don't catch up. I absorbed this information, feeling a complicated mix of vindication and pity. Your mother's situation isn't much better, James continued. Her house is in pre-foreclosure, and there are multiple collection agencies after her for unpaid credit card debts. And Rebecca? She's been telling people that you stole your grandmother's money, that it was intended to be split among the family, but you manipulated the will and ran off with everything. My chest tightened with anger. That's a lie. My grandmother was of sound mind when she wrote her will. She specifically left everything to me because she knew they would waste it. James nodded. I believe you. But they're painting a very different picture to anyone who will listen. He pulled out his tablet and showed me screenshots from Rebecca's private social media accounts, ones I couldn't access. Posts about how her mentally unstable sister had stolen the family inheritance, and how they were struggling to make ends meet while she lives in luxury. They've also been actively searching for you, James said, his voice turning more serious. They've hired someone to trace your new address through property records. So far, they've narrowed it down to Maine but don't have your specific location yet. The thought of them closing in on me sent a wave of nausea through my body. These people seem desperate, James warned. Desperate people do desperate things. I strongly suggest you increase your security measures and be extremely careful about what information you share and with whom. I left our meeting with a heavy heart but a clearer understanding of what I was dealing with. That night, I set up alerts for any mentions of my name or address online. I informed my work that no information about me was to be given out to anyone, regardless of who they claimed to be. As I checked each of my security cameras before bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that my family's financial desperation made them more dangerous than ever. They weren't just after a portion of my inheritance anymore, they needed all of it to save themselves from financial ruin. And people who feel entitled to what you have rarely take no for an answer. 6 months had passed since I fled Connecticut, and I was finally beginning to feel settled in Portland. My home renovations were nearly complete. My job at the publishing house had become more than just a distraction, and my sessions with Dr. Reed had decreased from weekly to bi-weekly as my anxiety lessened. Jessica and I had grown closer, often spending Friday evenings together watching old movies or trying new restaurants. She'd been a consistent, supportive presence in my life, or so I thought. One evening, as we sat in my kitchen sharing a bottle of wine, Jessica began asking unusually specific questions about my finances. So that trust from your grandmother, is it one lump sum, or does it pay out over time? She asked, seemingly casually. I stiffened. I'd never mentioned a trust, only an inheritance. And I'd been deliberately vague about the amount. Why do you ask? I replied, carefully keeping my tone neutral. Jessica shrugged. Just curious. Michael and I were talking about investments the other day, and I remembered you mentioned your grandmother left you some money. The mention of Michael sent a warning bell ringing in my head. They had been discussing my finances behind my back? It's complicated, I said vaguely. Nothing too exciting. The conversation moved on, but I remained unsettled. After Jessica left, I retrieved my phone and checked my security app. I scrolled back through recent footage until I found what I was looking for. Jessica arriving earlier that evening. But instead of coming directly to my door as I'd assumed, she had walked around the perimeter of my house first, pausing to look at windows and doors before finally ringing the bell. My stomach churned. This wasn't normal behavior for a friend coming to dinner. The next day, I decided to test my suspicions. I created a fake email account and sent Jessica a message pretending to be Kyle, including details only he would know, details I had shared with Jessica in confidence. The response came within hours. I've been trying to get more info from her, but she's really private about the money. All I know is she bought the house outright and doesn't have a mortgage. I'm working on finding out more. She trusts me. I stared at the screen, feeling physically ill. Jessica, my first friend in Portland, the person who had welcomed me and made me feel less alone, had been feeding information to my family all along. I confronted her the next day, meeting at a public cafe rather than my home. I simply showed her the email exchange on my phone and waited. Her face crumpled. Cassie, I can explain. How long? I interrupted. How long have you been in contact with them? She looked down at her coffee. Kyle reached out to me about 3 months ago through Facebook. He said he was worried about you, that you'd had a mental breakdown and the family was trying to find you to make sure you were okay. And you believed him? A complete stranger? Rather than me? At first, I did, she admitted. He was very convincing. He had family photos with you in them, new details about your life. Then he started asking about money, and I realized something wasn't right. But by then, I was already involved. "Were you paid?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her silence was answer enough. "Does Michael know? Is he involved too?" "No," Jessica said quickly. "He has no idea. It was just me." I stood up, gathering my things. "I trusted you, Jessica. You were the first person who made me feel welcome here." "Cassie, please." She reached for my arm. "I made a mistake. I stopped giving him information weeks ago when I realized what was happening. I was going to tell you, but you didn't." I cut her off. "And now I can never trust you again." I walked out of the cafe, straight to my car, and drove home in a daze. Once there, I immediately changed all my passwords and security questions. I contacted the security company to update my system, adding interior cameras and upgrading to their most comprehensive protection package. I also arranged a meeting with a security consultant who specialized in high-net-worth individuals. "Based on what you've told me, Miss Mitchell, I recommend several immediate measures," said Marcus Bradley, a former military intelligence officer. "First, we'll install a panic room in your home, a secure space you can retreat to if there's an intrusion. Second, we'll add motion sensors throughout the property perimeter. Third, I suggest we review and enhance your digital security protocols." The cost was substantial, but my peace of mind was worth every penny. As Marcus and his team worked on my home over the next few days, I found myself withdrawing further from the world. I requested to work remotely full-time, which my boss reluctantly approved. I canceled all social plans and had my groceries delivered rather than risk running into Jessica or Michael. During my next therapy session, Dr. Reed expressed concern about my increasing isolation. "Cassandra, while your caution is understandable, complete isolation isn't healthy," she said. "You're creating a prison for yourself." "A prison keeps people out as well as in," I countered. "Right now, that's what I need." Dr. Reed sighed. "The betrayal by Jessica has clearly triggered your earlier trauma with your family. But not everyone is Jessica, and not everyone is your family. There are trustworthy people in the world." I wanted to believe her, but Jessica's betrayal had confirmed my worst fears, that I couldn't trust anyone. It had reinforced the lessons my family had taught me throughout my childhood, that people only got close to me when they wanted something from me. As I drove home from therapy, memories flooded back. My high school boyfriend who dumped me the day after meeting my wealthy family, only to try to reconcile when he learned my grandmother was paying for my college. My college roommate who'd stolen my credit card and racked up thousands in charges. My mother telling me I was too trusting and naive, while simultaneously taking advantage of that trust herself. Each betrayal had built upon the last, creating layers of scar tissue around my heart. Jessica had just added another layer. At home, I checked my security cameras, a habit that had become almost compulsive, and froze. There was Michael, standing at my front door, knocking. I hadn't given him my new phone number after changing it, and I'd blocked both him and Jessica on social media. How long had he been coming by? I watched through the camera as he finally gave up and walked back to his car. But instead of leaving immediately, he sat there for nearly 20 minutes, occasionally looking up at my house. Was he genuinely concerned about me? Or watching, gathering information? That night, I received an anonymous email. "We know where you are." 5 simple words that sent ice through my veins. The next morning, I signed up for self-defense classes and purchased a small canister of pepper spray to carry with me at all times. My beautiful home no longer felt like a sanctuary but a target, and I was determined to be ready when the inevitable confrontation came. 7 months after my escape, a knock at the door startled me from my work. Through my security camera, I saw a middle-aged man in a suit holding an envelope. Not family, but not a delivery person either. I used the intercom system. "Can I help you? Cassandra Mitchell? I have legal documents to deliver to you." My heart raced. A process server. They had found me. I had no choice but to accept the documents. Ignoring legal proceedings would only make things worse. With shaking hands, I opened the front door just wide enough to take the envelope. "You've been served," the man said formally, then turned and walked back to his car. Inside the envelope was a lawsuit filed by my mother and sister, claiming I had stolen family heirlooms, specifically My grandmother's jewelry collection that had been explicitly left to me in her will. I immediately called Elizabeth Porter, an attorney specializing in estate litigation whom I'd consulted when first receiving my inheritance. They're claiming the jewelry was promised to them verbally by your grandmother and that you took advantage of her declining mental state to have her change her will, Elizabeth explained after reviewing the documents. It's a frivolous suit with no merit, but it accomplishes what they really want: confirmation of your location and forcing you into court where they can confront you. Can we counter somehow? I asked. Absolutely. We can counter-sue for harassment and file for restraining orders based on their pattern of behavior. I'll need documentation of their attempts to access your finances and any threatening communications. I sent Elizabeth everything: the email screenshots, the bank's fraud investigation results, James Mercer's findings, and the anonymous threatening email. This is excellent documentation, she said. We'll file tomorrow. In the meantime, avoid all contact with them. If they attempt to approach you, call the police immediately. I felt marginally better having a legal strategy, but the knowledge that they now had my exact address kept me on high alert. That night, I thought I heard noises outside and spent hours watching my security cameras, jumping at every shadow. 2 days later, another knock at the door. This time, a different process server with additional legal papers. A petition for a competency hearing, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my inheritance. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks, Elizabeth assured me when I called her in a panic. It's a common intimidation tactic. The court will see through it. But my anxiety wasn't about the legal merits of their claims. It was about the knowledge that they were closing in, escalating their efforts to get to me and my money. My suspicions were confirmed when I reviewed the security footage from after the process server left. Instead of immediately driving away, he walked around my property, taking photos of my home from different angles. I called Elizabeth. He was documenting my house. Why would a process server do that unless someone paid him to? That's highly irregular and potentially illegal, she said gravely. I'll add it to our counterfiling. In the meantime, I think you should consider staying somewhere else temporarily. A hotel, perhaps. Or with a trusted friend. The problem was, I no longer had any trusted friends. Jessica's betrayal had seen to that. But the suggestion of leaving my home temporarily made sense. I called Michael, deciding to take a calculated risk. I need a favor. It's important. Cassie, I've been worried sick about you. You disappeared without a word. I know, and I'm sorry. But I'm in trouble and need somewhere to stay for a few days while my security is upgraded. Can I use your guest room? He agreed immediately, sounding genuinely concerned. Maybe he really hadn't been part of Jessica's deception. I packed a small bag and left through the back door, taking a circuitous route to ensure I wasn't followed. At Michael's apartment, he was warm and welcoming, asking no questions beyond whether I was in immediate danger. Family trouble? I explained vaguely. Nothing life-threatening, just stressful. Stay as long as you need, he offered. Mi casa es su casa. For 3 days, I worked remotely from his guest room while a security team upgraded my home system. Michael was the perfect host, giving me space but also providing company when I needed it. We ate dinner together each night, watched movies, and for brief moments, I felt almost normal. On the 3rd night, after we'd shared a bottle of wine, Michael moved closer to me on the couch. Before I knew what was happening, he was leaning in for a kiss. I pulled back, startled. Michael? I'm sorry, he said quickly. I thought there was something between us. The way you came to me for help. I came to you as a friend, I clarified, standing up. I'm dealing with too much right now for anything else. He looked embarrassed. Of course. Bad timing on my part. But something about his expression bothered me. Disappointment, yes, but also calculation. Had I misread his intentions? Was his hospitality just a means to an end? I retreated to the guest room, confused and unsettled. While Michael slept, I searched his apartment, finding nothing suspicious, until I checked his laptop, which he'd left open on the kitchen counter. There, in his email drafts folder, was a message addressed to Kyle. She's staying with me now. Making progress. We'll update when I have more info. My blood ran cold. Michael too? Had anything in my new life been genuine? I packed my things silently and called a taxi, leaving before dawn. Back at my house, the security team had completed their work, adding reinforced doors, window sensors, and a fully equipped panic room converted from a small office space. But the security upgrades couldn't protect me from the revelation that Michael, like Jessica, had been reporting to Kyle about my activities. My feeling of betrayal was so complete, so overwhelming, that I collapsed on my kitchen floor and sobbed until I had no tears left. From that day forward, I cut off all contact with the outside world except what was absolutely necessary. I worked entirely from home, had groceries and necessities delivered, and conducted therapy sessions exclusively via secure video calls. James Mercer, who continued monitoring my family's activities, warned me that their financial situation had become increasingly desperate. Kyle's primary investor pulled out of his latest venture, James reported, and their mortgage company has officially begun foreclosure proceedings. They're running out of options. A week later, my security company called to inform me that someone had attempted to disable my alarm system during the night but had been deterred by the new fail-safe measures. The attempt was sophisticated, the security technician explained. Not an amateur job. Whoever did this has experience with alarm systems. I thought of Kyle, who had briefly worked for a home security company years ago before starting his string of failed businesses. They were getting bolder, more desperate. The trap was closing, and I needed to be ready. That night, I deliberately leaked false information through an email I knew would be intercepted, suggesting I was planning to travel to Boston the following weekend. In reality, I had no intention of leaving my fortress. I was setting a trap of my own, waiting to see how they would respond. Whatever came next, I would be ready. 8 months had passed since I left Connecticut, and winter had settled over Portland with a vengeance. Snow piled against my windows, and the wind howled through the bare branches of the maple trees lining my street. I'd grown accustomed to my solitude, finding a strange comfort in my routines and the absolute control I had over my environment. Then a formal letter arrived from my mother's attorney, claiming she had been hospitalized for a critical condition and requesting I contact the family immediately. After my experience with Rebecca's fake cancer, I wasn't about to fall for another medical emergency without verification. I called the hospital mentioned in the letter directly. "I'm calling to inquire about a patient, Diana Mitchell," I said, using my mother's maiden name, which she had returned to after my father left. "Are you family?" the hospital administrator asked. "I'm her daughter." There was a brief pause while the administrator checked the records. "Yes, Miss Mitchell was admitted 3 days ago for gallbladder surgery. She was discharged yesterday afternoon." So there had been a genuine hospitalization, but hardly the life-threatening emergency described in the letter. Just another manipulation tactic, exaggerating a routine procedure into a critical condition to prey on my guilt and concern. Still, something in me couldn't ignore the fact that my mother had been in the hospital, regardless of the severity. I arranged for a generous anonymous donation to be made toward her medical bills but maintained my silence. No calls, no messages. The financial help was as much connection as I could manage without risking further exploitation. Later that week, Michael attempted to contact me again, this time through a carefully worded email expressing concern about my abrupt departure and asking if we could talk. I didn't respond, but I did forward the email to James Mercer, asking him to investigate whether Michael was still in contact with my family. His findings confirmed my worst fears. Bank records showed regular payments from Kyle to Michael, dating back to just a week after I had first met him at trivia night. What I had believed was a chance meeting had been carefully orchestrated. Kyle had found out where I worked through property records and sent Michael to befriend me, gather information, and eventually gain access to my home. The payments increase each time he provides significant information, James explained. The largest was right after you stayed at his apartment. The revelation was devastating but also clarifying. If Kyle had gone to such lengths to plant someone in my life, it meant they were truly desperate. My anonymous donation toward my mother's medical bills would only be a temporary reprieve. I decided to confront Michael directly, not in person, but via a secure email that couldn't be traced back to me. "I know you've been reporting to Kyle Reynolds about me. I have proof of the payments. Whatever they're paying you, it's not worth the legal consequences of conspiracy to commit fraud and invasion of privacy. Stop now, or I'll be forced to take legal action." His response came within minutes. "Cassie, it's not what you think. Yes, I met you because of Kyle, but my feelings for you are real. He's desperate. They all are. They're about to lose everything. Just talk to them. That's all they want." I didn't bother responding. Instead, I forwarded the exchange to Elizabeth Porter to add to our growing legal case against my family. The confrontation with Michael, while painful, gave me a sense of reclaiming control. I was no longer a passive victim of their manipulations. I was fighting back. That sense of empowerment led me to make a difficult decision. It was time to completely cut myself off from all outside contact, except for my attorney, my therapist, and James Mercer. I informed my publishing house that I needed to take a leave of absence for personal reasons, promising to return when my situation stabilized. My boss was understanding but concerned. "Cassandra, are you sure this is the best approach? Isolation can be its own kind of prison." It was nearly word for word what Dr. Reed had said to me, and I gave her the same answer. Sometimes a prison keeps people out as well as in. I stocked up on essentials, arranged for regular grocery deliveries, and settled in for what I knew would be a difficult winter of solitude. My therapy sessions with Dr. Reed became my main connection to the outside world. "I'm worried about you, Cassandra," she said during one of our video sessions. "While I understand your need for security, complete isolation isn't sustainable long-term. It's temporary," I assured her, "just until the legal situation is resolved." But we both knew that could take months, even years. And something in me had fundamentally changed. Trust, once broken so completely and repeatedly, was nearly impossible to rebuild. James Mercer's weekly reports painted an increasingly concerning picture of my family's desperation. Kyle had taken out high-interest loans from questionable sources. My mother had been forced to sell her house and move in with Rebecca and Kyle. They were pooling their resources, united in their determination to get to me and my money. "They're growing more erratic," James warned. "Kyle has been asking around about ways to bypass home security systems. I strongly suggest you inform the local police about your situation." I followed his advice, contacting the Portland Police Department and explaining that I had family members who might attempt to harass me. The officer I spoke with was sympathetic and arranged for patrol cars to drive by my house more frequently. All these precautions should have made me feel safer, but instead, I felt like I was preparing for an inevitable siege. My dreams were filled with images of my family breaking down my doors, cornering me, demanding what they believed was rightfully theirs. The security company alerted me to multiple attempts to disable my alarm system in January, all unsuccessful thanks to the enhanced measures, but each attempt more sophisticated than the last. In February, a neighbor called to tell me someone had been asking questions about me, showing my photograph around the neighborhood. "I didn't tell them anything," the neighbor assured me, "but I thought you should know they're looking for you." The walls were closing in, they weren't giving up. I decided to set a trap, deliberately leaking false information through channels I knew they monitored. I created a fake email exchange with a travel agent, discussing plans for an extended trip to Europe, with specific dates and flight information. I knew they would intercept it. They had been trying to hack my accounts for months. Then I waited, watching my security cameras, ready for whatever came next. Part of me almost hoped they would make their move. At least then, the waiting would be over. The night before my supposed departure date, I sat in my home office, every light in the house turned off, watching the security camera feeds on my laptop. Snow had been falling steadily all day, covering the ground in a thick white blanket that reflected the moonlight, making my yard unnaturally bright on the black and white camera feed. At 2:17 a.m., movement triggered the perimeter sensors. 3 figures appeared at the edge of my property, trudging through the snow toward my house. Even with their faces partially obscured by winter hats and scarves, I recognized them immediately. My mother, my sister, and Kyle. They had taken the bait, believing I would be leaving the next day. They were coming to make one last desperate attempt before I supposedly fled the country. My finger hovered over the panic button that would immediately alert the security company and police. But something made me hesitate. A small, wounded part of me wanted to hear what they had to say. After 8 months of silence followed by manipulation and harassment, I wanted to confront them directly, to understand why they felt entitled to destroy my life for their own gain. I watched as they approached my front door, huddled together against the cold. My security cameras captured their every move with crystal clarity. This footage would be valuable evidence for the restraining orders Elizabeth was pursuing. As they reached my porch, I moved to my panic room and locked the reinforced door behind me. From there, I could safely observe and communicate through the intercom system without putting myself at physical risk. I watched on the monitor as Kyle tested a window, looking for a way in. Rebecca pounded on the front door while my mother stood back, looking frail and much older than when I'd last seen her. My heart raced as I reached for the intercom button. Whatever came next would change everything. The security camera footage displayed crystal clear images despite the darkness. My mother's once immaculate appearance had deteriorated dramatically, her designer clothes replaced by a shabby coat with missing buttons, her perfectly coiffed hair now limp and graying at the roots. Rebecca looked gaunt and angry, pacing back and forth on my porch like a caged animal. Kyle's desperation was evident in his disheveled appearance and the frantic way he kept looking over his shoulder, as if expecting the police to appear at any moment. They took turns hammering on my door, the hollow thuds echoing through my empty house. The doorbell chimed repeatedly, creating an eerie symphony of desperation. From the safety of my panic room, I watched them on multiple camera angles, transfixed by this surreal reunion. These people, my so-called family, had traveled across 3 states in the dead of winter to confront me. The lengths they had gone to were both frightening and pathetically sad. As I watched, fragments of happier memories flickered through my mind. Rebecca teaching me to ride a bike when we were children. My mother making chicken soup when I was sick with the flu. Even Kyle helping me move into my first apartment during college. Had those moments been real, or just performances designed to keep me compliant until they needed something from me? My finger hovered over the intercom button. Part of me wanted to call the police immediately and have them arrested for trespassing. But another part, the part that had spent 8 months in therapy working through my trauma, needed closure. I pressed the button. "I can see you." They froze, looking around wildly for the source of my voice. "Cassie?" My mother's voice cracked with what sounded like relief. "Oh, thank God. We've been so worried about you, sweetheart." The fake concern in her tone made my stomach turn. "Really? 8 months without a single call or text, and suddenly you're worried about me? Or are you just worried about what happens to you now that you've lost your houses?" Rebecca stepped forward, her face contorting with anger. "You selfish bitch, you know exactly why we're here. You took everything and left us with nothing." "I took what was legally left to me by Gran," I replied calmly. "What you're doing now is trespassing. I suggest you leave before I call the police." "Please, Cassie," my mother pleaded, pushing Rebecca aside. "Just hear us out. We're family. We made mistakes. But we love you." For a moment, her voice sounded so sincere that I felt a flicker of doubt. Maybe they really did care, in their own dysfunctional way. Then Kyle spoke, shattering the illusion. "Look, Cassie, we know you're leaving for Europe tomorrow. We just need some financial help to get back on our feet. A small portion of your inheritance. You won't even miss it with all that money." And there it was, the real reason for their sudden appearance. Not concern for my well-being. Not love. Just another attempt to get their hands on my grandmother's money. "How did you know about my trip?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I wanted to hear them admit to the surveillance, the hacking, the invasion of my privacy. Kyle hesitated, exchanging glances with Rebecca. "We, heard it from a mutual friend." "You mean Michael? The man you paid to spy on me? Or are you referring to how you tried to hack my email? Or maybe the multiple attempts to bypass my security system? Which federal crime would you like to confess to first?" Their shocked expressions would have been comical if the situation weren't so serious. "You've been monitoring us?" Rebecca asked incredulously, as if I was the one who had crossed a line. "Of course I have. I knew you wouldn't just let me go. People like you never do." People like us, my mother repeated, her voice rising. We are your family. Everything we've done was for this family. No, I said firmly. Everything you've done was for yourselves. You never cared about me except for what you could take from me. That's not true, my mother insisted, tears welling in her eyes. We've always loved you. We just need help right now. We're about to be homeless, Cassie. Is that what you want? Your own mother living on the street? For a split second, I felt the familiar tug of guilt and obligation that had kept me tethered to them for so many years. Then I remembered all the manipulations, the lies, the betrayals. What I want is for you to leave me alone. Permanently. I have all the documentation of your harassment, fraud attempts, and now trespassing. I'm pursuing restraining orders against all of you. You can't do that, Rebecca shouted. We'll fight you in court. We'll tell everyone what you did, how you stole from your own family. Go ahead, I challenged. I have nothing to hide, do you? Kyle, who had been suspiciously quiet, suddenly made a move toward one of my ground floor windows, testing it for weakness. The security camera caught his every motion as he tried to force it open. Kyle is currently attempting to break into my home, I narrated, as if providing commentary for the police who would eventually view this footage. That's breaking and entering, which is a felony. The window didn't budge, protected by both physical reinforcements and electronic sensors. Frustrated, Kyle kicked at it, triggering the alarm system. A piercing siren filled the air, and automated lights flooded the property with brightness. Security breach detected, announced the computerized voice of my alarm system. Authorities have been notified. Please vacate the premises immediately. You called the cops? Kyle shouted, panic replacing his earlier determination. Are you insane? You're going to have your own family arrested? You stopped being my family the moment you decided my inheritance was more important than my well-being, I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Through the cameras, I watched as they argued briefly among themselves before the distant wail of police sirens made the decision for them. They fled, stumbling through the snow toward a car parked down the street. The security cameras tracked their retreat, capturing clear images of their faces and the license plate of their vehicle. Minutes later, 2 police cruisers pulled up outside my house. I deactivated the alarm and used the intercom to explain the situation to the officers, directing them to the security footage that had captured the entire incident. Would you like to press charges, Miss Mitchell? One of the officers asked after reviewing the footage. I took a deep breath. Yes. And I want restraining orders against all 3 of them. As the police left with copies of the security footage and my formal complaint, I stood alone in my living room, looking out at the snow-covered yard where my family's footprints were already beginning to fill in with fresh snow. For the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of peace. They had shown their true colors not just to me, but to law enforcement. Their desperation had driven them to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and now there would be legal consequences that no amount of manipulation could erase. I picked up my phone and called Elizabeth Porter, ready to move forward with the next phase of legally severing ties with the people who had caused me so much pain. It was time to close this chapter of my life once and for all. 1 month after the security camera incident, I sat in Elizabeth Porter's office reviewing the final paperwork for the restraining orders against my mother, sister, and brother-in-law. The judge granted permanent orders for all 3, Elizabeth said, sliding the documents across the desk. The security footage was irrefutable evidence of their harassment and Kyle's attempted break-in. They cannot come within 500 feet of you, your home, or your workplace. They cannot contact you by phone, email, social media, or through third parties for any reason. I traced my fingers over the official court seal, feeling a complicated mixture of relief and sadness. So it's really over? Elizabeth's expression softened. Legally, yes. Emotionally, that's a different journey. She was right. The legal battle had been straightforward compared to the internal one I was still fighting. That afternoon, during my therapy session with Dr. Reed, we discussed this new chapter in my recovery. You've achieved something significant, Cassandra, Dr. Reed said. You set boundaries and enforced them even when it was incredibly painful to do so. That shows tremendous growth. But I still feel hollow, I admitted. Like there's this empty space where my family should be. That's natural. You're grieving not just the relationships you had, but the relationships you wished you could have had. The healthy, supportive family that everyone deserves. We spent the session exploring that grief, acknowledging it, honoring it, but also recognizing that it didn't have to define my future. Dr. Reed suggested it was time to selectively reopen my life, to cautiously build connections again. Isolation protected you when you needed protection, she explained. But now it's becoming its own kind of prison, just as I warned. You've secured your physical safety. The next step is rebuilding your emotional safety. She recommended a support group for survivors of family abuse, people who would understand my experiences without judgment. After some hesitation, I attended my first meeting the following week. Sitting in a circle with 7 strangers in the community center basement, I felt painfully exposed. But as each person shared their story, I recognized pieces of my own experience reflected back at me. The manipulation tactics, the guilt, the painful decision to create distance, the complex grief of mourning people who were still alive but no longer in your life. A woman named Grace, whose story of financial exploitation by her son particularly resonated with me, approached me after the meeting. "First time's the hardest," she said with a gentle smile. "But it gets easier. We've all been where you are." Over the following weeks, the support group became a cornerstone of my recovery. Unlike my previous attempts at friendship in Portland, these relationships were built on a foundation of mutual understanding and respect for boundaries. There were no hidden agendas, no invasive questions about my finances, just genuine human connection. Gradually, I began to emerge from my self-imposed isolation. I returned to work at the publishing house, though I was more selective about personal information I shared with colleagues. I started volunteering at the local animal shelter again, finding healing in the simple, unconditional affection of abandoned creatures who needed love as much as I did. 3 months after the restraining orders were granted, I made a decision that would change not just my life, but potentially many others. I established the New Beginning Foundation, using a portion of my inheritance to help others escape toxic family situations. The foundation provided emergency housing, legal assistance, and therapy services to people who needed to make the difficult choice I had made. "Your grandmother would be proud," Elizabeth said when I shared my plans. "She left you that money to secure your future. By helping others, you're honoring her intention in the most meaningful way possible." The foundation gave me purpose beyond my own healing. It transformed my painful experience into something that could benefit others, creating meaning from the chaos my family had caused. On a crisp fall day, almost exactly 1 year after I had fled Connecticut, I sat in my car, watching as a young mother and her 2 children moved into a small apartment provided by my foundation. The woman, Sarah, had escaped an abusive husband who had drained their savings and left them destitute. Now she had a safe place to rebuild, just as I had. I didn't approach her this moment, wasn't about me or my need for validation. It was about her fresh start, her new beginning. But seeing the relief on her face as she unlocked the door to her new home brought tears to my eyes. On the drive back to my house, I realized I hadn't checked my security cameras in days. The compulsion that had once dominated my life had gradually faded as I focused on helping others and rebuilding my own sense of safety in the world. My Victorian home no longer felt like a fortress, but a sanctuary, a place of peace rather than fear. I had planted a garden in the spring, watching with satisfaction as the seeds I carefully placed in the soil grew into vibrant flowers and vegetables. A metaphor for my own growth, perhaps, but no less beautiful for its obviousness. The family we're born into shapes us, but it doesn't define us. Sometimes the family we choose, whether friends, support groups, or the community we build around us, provides the love and acceptance we always deserved but never received. And sometimes, the most important relationship to rebuild is the one with ourselves. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a small package on my porch. For a moment, old fears flickered. Had they found me again despite the restraining orders? But the security camera showed the mail carrier delivering it earlier that day. Inside was a handmade card from my support group, signed by each member, celebrating my 1-year anniversary of choosing freedom. I placed the card on my mantle and looked around at the home I had created for myself, not just the physical space, but the life I was building. It wasn't perfect, and the healing wasn't complete. Some wounds leave scars that never fully disappear. But I was no longer defined by those wounds or by the people who had inflicted them. I was Cassandra Mitchell, survivor, founder, friend, and so much more than the scared woman who had fled in the night 1 year ago. And for the first time in my life, that felt like more than enough. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to distance yourself from toxic family members? How did you rebuild your life afterward? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story could help someone else feeling alone in their struggle. Remember to like, subscribe, and share if this resonated with you. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from what's hurting us, even when it comes disguised as family.